what happened this week in Assen feels like it shouldn't even be possible. A team that didn't even exist about 3 years ago, that came from NASCAR, just scored a 1-2 in the sprint and in the main GP of the Netherlands Grand Prix. Trackhouse is a customer of Aprilia. Aprilia are the manufacturer. They were leading the championship, and to see that young team win is something that would be near impossible in F1. And to top it all off, we had a Japanese rider winning the main Grand Prix for the first time in 22 years. I'm Tim from Along Trackside. The three biggest stories coming out of this weekend are one, that Aprilia is establishing its dominance and continuing to do so for the title race this year. Secondly, we're going to look at Trackhouse, a team that is an unlikely winner, and how that could pretty much never happen in F1. And when we look at the GP with Ogura winning for the first time in 22 years as a Japanese rider, what's the comparison to this week's race in F1 and looking at history that's been made? Aprilia took over Assen. They qualified in the first 4 spots. So that is essentially every single Aprilia beat every other manufacturer. It was the Aprilia of Jorge Martin getting his first ever pole position for that team, followed by Trackhouse, Aprilia, Trackhouse. The story that we all thought was going to happen would be the Aprilia factory team fighting amongst themselves. Bezzecchi being the world championship leader coming into this round with Jorge Martin the challenger. Interestingly, Jorge Martin is due to leave the factory team with Pecco Bagnaia coming in next year. So that adds that little bit of extra pressure. But what we ended up seeing was the customer of Aprilia, Trackhouse Racing, beating the manufacturer. We also saw Bezzecchi crash out of the main Grand Prix after losing a place, trying to get it back, and then flipping over multiple times. Thankfully, he's okay. Jorge Martin was leading the race for the majority of all the laps, and after his teammate fell off at 200 kilometers an hour, it looked like he was set to win. But after the Trackhouse riders passed Martin in the later stages of the race, it was Ai Ogura who ended up on top, taking the win. Ducati was hanging around, Digia taking second spot in the sprint race, and then 2 Ducatis coming 4th and 5th in the GP. But what's interesting is, how can a customer beat the manufacturer? Trackhouse is relatively new to racing globally. They started in NASCAR in 2020 with Justin Marks as their founder, based in North Carolina in the US. I think it's unusual for a NASCAR team to get involved in MotoGP, but they did in 2024, taking over the old RNF team. They've always been an Aprilia customer, but when they first started racing in MotoGP, they had a mix of some of the older bikes. So they were testing newer bikes and older bikes from Aprilia to see what the differences would be. And this year they're riding the latest model RSGP bikes from Aprilia. So they've got the same bikes that Jorge Martin and Bezzecchi ride. But even though they have the same bike, they have a different team. It's obviously going to be smaller than the manufacturer. So what we end up seeing, especially in MotoGP a lot, is the rider's skill makes the difference. And that is just such a contrast to F1, where in the F1, it's generally the manufacturer that always has an advantage. No matter how skillful the driver is, if you don't have the best car from the biggest manufacturer, it's unlikely to qualify well, let alone win a race, and let alone lock out podiums. I think an exception to that broad rule would be McLaren, who is a customer of Mercedes, but they are a full-blown manufacturer of cars. And so the only similarity is that they're purchasing an engine from Mercedes. The real comparison in terms of customer versus manufacturer, you think of Haas, who currently purchases engines from Ferrari. We've got Williams, who purchases engines from Mercedes. At best, they're fighting for mid-pack, whereas the actual manufacturers, they're fighting for wins and they're fighting for championships. So it's really exciting to see that difference in the top tier of motorcycle racing, where the rider is going to make the difference on the day based on their merit And what's so exciting is the person that won the race for the GP in Assen this year. Ai Ogura takes his maiden MotoGP win. He's the first Japanese rider since Makoto Tamada 22 years ago to take a win. And only the 13th time that a Japanese rider has actually won a MotoGP premier race. And he did it the hard way. During his race, there was a lap where his rear ride height device got stuck. So he was riding compromised. He fell down the pack and then fought his way back, coming through to the front of the race. And he won it dominantly. As a side note, ride height devices have been looked at, and the front whole shot devices have been banned from the Assen GP moving forward. Still on the rear of the bike, there have been ride height devices, and seeing that manufacturer in this race tells an interesting story. Will that be reviewed and will that be changed in future races? And so when you compare the weekend in MotoGP and the race weekend in F1, there is a parallel of people being beaten at home. With it being an all Aprilia front row or front four, you would have expected the home team, Aprilia, the manufacturer, to be winning, but they got beaten by their customer, by Trackhouse. In F1, we're at the Red Bull Ring, the home circuit to the Red Bull racing team and also to Racing Bulls. You'd be expecting them on top, but at the home circuit, Mercedes took first and third. The consolation prize is Max Verstappen getting second, so he still did get on the podium, but he was beaten arguably at his home race, or his second home race, apart from Netherlands. So what does it look like in the standings now? Martin overtook Bezzecchi for the lead of the World Championship. Di Gio remains in third place. Ai Ogura jumps up to fourth place in the standings with his win and getting second in the prior week's race, with the defending world champion Marc Marquez rounding out the top five. To keep it interesting though, Raul Fernandez on the second Aprilia from Trackhouse is sixth. So we have what's looking like every Aprilia with a shot at the world title this year. Next up, in July, we've got the German GP at the Sachsenring. And I'd love to hear from you or any F1 fan. What would you rather? The team on top always staying on top, or your favorite rider or driver always having a chance to win? And as always, it really helps if you can like and subscribe.